So making things that make money can always be a challenge. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I made these. These are knee mats. You can just throw them down and use them for anything. They can come in a bunch of different colors. You can engrave on either the smooth side or the rough side, and you get a very different effect. And when you use them, you can just flop them down and drop a knee, do whatever work you're going to do, and when you're done you can just pick them up and move on. And they're good for my shop. I use them in my shop because I have concrete floors. They're good for gardens, pretty much anywhere where you're going to kneel down. And in this video I'll show you how to make them, I'll show you how cheap they are, and I'll show you how you can make a ton of money on these. So let's get started. I'm just going to jump right in here and start talking about these knee pads or knee mats that I showed you at the beginning. They're really easy to create. They start from a 2 foot by 2 foot EVA foam tile, and you can buy these tiles at any hardware store or Walmart. Anybody's got these, and they come in a variety of colors, so you can choose black, you could choose anything you want. Now the beauty of these is that they're cheap. You can buy them in big packs or small packs, and they still run about $5 a tile. And to make one of these mats, we're going to chop it in half so you can actually get 2 mats out of this, which means your material cost here is about $2.50. Now, that's the good news. For the rest of this video, I'll show you the design, that I did. I'll show you a couple of neat things you can do with these, and we'll talk about some of the profit, some of the ways to make money on this. So let's get going. We'll start with the design. So you can design this with any tool you have that can do vector graphics. It could be Inkscape, it could be Adobe Illustrator, even Lightburn. I happen to be using Fusion 360 here just because it's a tool I happen to live in. And all of these dimensions here are in inches. So you start with a rectangle that's 21 inches by 10 inches. And that's enough to use half of that material on the sheet, and then you can put some kind of handle in it. On this one I chose an ellipse, but I also have one that uses a standard kind of oval hole rather than an elliptical hole. And the hole here is about 4 inches long and 1.5 inches wide, and that's enough to get your fingers in there and carry it around. It's also 1.25 inches away from the end. So even though I'll put this design as SVG files up on the member site, if you're a member you can just download it. It's a very easy design, so you don't really need to do anything here. And that's all it is. And if you want to see what it's going to actually look like here, in Fusion I can model the actual thickness of it, so that's what it's going to look like. Now material preparation is really just a case of cutting this foam tile the size of your workspace, so that you can actually do your final cutting on it. Now you can cut this with a diode laser as well, but the problem with a diode laser is the workspace tends to be a little smaller than it should be for this kind of project. But if you just want to make a small square mat, you can certainly use a diode laser to do this. So all I'm going to do in this case is plunk down my piece of foam, measure roughly to get it cut in half, and it's just a case of marking it and drop a straight edge on and cut it. And in the end, you get 2 pieces that are, should be equal size, and that's enough to make 2 of these mats. The last step to creating one of these knee mats is to drop a piece of material onto the laser. I'm using the X-Tool P2S here, which just makes things easier. It's got a big enough workspace to do what I need. And I'll drop the material there, then I'll hop over into XCS, and I've imported the SVG file here so you can see it. And the beauty of XCS and the X-Tool laser is I have a really good camera, so positioning is trivial. And all I have to do here to cut this out is I'll set the cutting settings, which are going to be 45 millimeters a second in speed and 80% power, and then I can just shoot this over to the laser and I'll get a mat. Now if that's all you were interested in, you could certainly take a $2.50 piece of EVA foam and you could turn it into a mat that you could sell for $10, $12 easily. Typically I've seen a lot of these listed for $15 if you're buying a commercial one at a hardware store, so figure around that. And that would be fine. You'd have a really good profit margin there, but you can add even more value here. And the way I'm going to do that on one of these mats is I just grabbed a piece of text. I'm going to put a bit of a slogan on this mat. because I want this to be a garden mat. I'm making a couple of those actually. And I'll just grab a flower from the XCS image library. I'll stick it in there and position things the way I want them. I'll probably resize things here, make them a little bit smaller, and get everything kind of centered. Now, once I have everything I want, it's easier to just group this, and you can see the index line there. It's in the center. The only other thing I have to do here is the settings. It's going to be fairly low power. It's going to be about 13% power, and we're going to go really fast because this stuff, especially on the smooth side of the foam, engraves really quickly, and that'll give us a nice deep engrave that you'll be able to feel. I'll pull this off the laser so we can have a closer look here, and you can see the engraving on the smooth side of this EVA foam looks just amazing, and you can do a lot of interesting things here, and it will certainly add to the price of this mat when you sell it to somebody. So for that first example, I used the smooth side of the foam, not the textured surface that normally goes up. So if you want to actually engrave on that textured surface, I'm just including a little tip here because I had to do, I'd say, fairly radically different settings for this. And I brought up another image here when I did the green mat, and the settings I used was about 35% power, so quite a bit more, still going fast. And when I did the engrave, and I'm just going to show you a sped up version of some of it here, it doesn't actually cut through that textured surface, but it does engrave nice and dark on top of it, so it's a really nice effect. And you can also use that surface as well. Just a quick tip here to point out that the settings are different. I'll be the first to admit that cutting out kneeling pads is not the most glamorous thing you can do with a laser, but if you crunch the numbers here, you'll see why these are so appealing. So on the manufacturing side, if it's just a straight cut pad with no engraving on it, these things will cut out in a minute on a CO2 laser. If you're putting engraving on it, figure it's going to add another minute or two. So 1 to 3 minutes is going to be end-to-end manufacturing time. And I mentioned the material cost here is $2.50, so it costs almost nothing to make one of these. Now, for that, if you're selling just a straight cutout with no engraving, you're going to get $10 or $12 for it. If you then put engraving on it, add another $10 to that price. That means that the sales price here for a full-blown kneeling pad is around $22, and that's a whopping 880% margin. So lots of profit here. Now, you're not going to sell as many of these kneeling pads as you would, say, coasters at a craft fair, but the margins are way higher. A coaster, the material cost is a little lower. The manufacturing time is 10 times higher per coaster, and the profit margins are way lower, maybe 50%. So there's real appeal to having these. It doesn't mean you should give up coasters because you want lots of things to sell at a craft fair, but this is definitely one that's going to sell for higher prices, and keep that in mind. Now, if you want to find out, I use the Xtool P2S for this. If you want to find out more about it, click this link up here, and I'll see you next time.